In 1983, a classified report landed on the desk of the United States Army. It wasn't about weapons. It wasn't about enemy troop movements. It wasn't even about spies. It was about something far stranger, a theory that human consciousness isn't trapped inside the brain at all, that under the right conditions, it can detach from the body completely. Travel, observe, return. The report was real. It came from the CIA, and for decades, almost nobody outside a small circle of intelligence officials knew it existed. This is the story of the Gateway process, and why, at the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government spent years trying to prove that the human mind could leave the human body. In January 2003, the CIA quietly uploaded a batch of declassified files to its electronic reading room. Buried in that batch was a 29-page report titled Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. It was written in 1983 by a U.S. Army officer named Lieutenant Colonel Wayne M. McDonnell, working out of the Scientific and Technical Intelligence Directorate. For years, the document sat online, unnoticed. Then, decades later, it resurfaced, shared, screenshotted, and picked apart online, and people realized what they were reading. It wasn't science fiction. It was an internal U.S. intelligence assessment of a real training program, one that claimed to teach soldiers and analysts how to separate their consciousness from their physical body. The program had a name, the Monroe Institute's Gateway Voyage. To understand the document, you have to understand the man behind the technology it describes. Robert Monroe was not a scientist, a monk, or a mystic. He was a radio executive. In the 1950s, he ran a successful broadcasting company in New York. Then, according to his own account, something strange started happening to him. He began experiencing what he called out-of-body experiences, moments where he felt his awareness lift away from his physical body, float above it, and move through walls, rooms, and cities. Monroe didn't dismiss it. He got obsessive about it. He started recording his experiences in journals, and eventually, he asked a question that would define the rest of his life. If this is real, if consciousness really can detach from the body, can it be triggered on purpose? That question led him to build something new, a technology called Hemi-Sync. Hemi-Sync stands for hemispheric synchronization. The idea works like this. If you play a slightly different frequency tone into each ear, say 100 Hz in the left ear and 108 Hz in the right, your brain doesn't hear two tones. It perceives a third, phantom frequency, the mathematical difference between the two. In this case, 8 Hz. This phantom tone is called a binaural beat, and Monroe's theory was that by feeding the brain very specific binaural beats, you could nudge both hemispheres of the brain into sync with each other. Pulling the mind into altered states usually only reached through years of meditation. Monroe built an entire facility around this idea in rural Virginia, the Monroe Institute, and it worked well enough, or at least seemed convincing enough, that it eventually caught the attention of U.S. Army intelligence. That's where Lieutenant Colonel McDonnell comes in. This was the early 1980s. The Cold War was still very much alive, and American intelligence agencies were quietly funding research into anything that might give them an edge over the Soviet Union, including research the public would later find bizarre. This wasn't unique to the Gateway process. Around the same era, the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency were also funding the Stargate project, an initiative studying remote viewing, the claimed ability to psychically perceive distant locations. Against that backdrop, Gateway didn't look as strange as it does today. If the Soviets might be experimenting with consciousness as an intelligence tool, the thinking went, the U.S. couldn't afford to ignore the possibility either. So McDonnell was assigned to review the Monroe Institute's program and write an honest scientific assessment. Was any of this real, or was it pseudoscience? Here's where it gets genuinely strange. McDonnell's report doesn't just describe Hemi-Sync as a relaxation tool, it goes much further, framing consciousness itself through the lens of theoretical physics, citing ideas from quantum mechanics and referencing a holographic universe model, where reality itself is described as a kind of hologram, and human consciousness as a piece of a larger universal field. According to this framing, an out-of-body experience isn't the mind literally floating around a physical room. It's consciousness shifting its reference point within that holographic structure, perceiving reality from outside the narrow frame of the physical body. The report treats this as a serious hypothesis worth investigating, not a debunking exercise. It suggests that if consciousness really can operate independently of physical location, the implications for intelligence gathering, and for physics itself, would be enormous. To be clear, this is a theoretical framework in a single internal report, not an established scientific finding. Mainstream physicists have pushed back hard on this application of quantum ideas to consciousness. But the fact that a military intelligence report engaged with the idea this seriously is exactly why the document still fascinates people decades later. So what came of it? Publicly, very little. The Gateway process was never confirmed as an operational intelligence program the way Stargate eventually was. There's no declassified evidence that astral espionage ever became a functioning Army capability. The Monroe Institute, meanwhile, still exists today. It continues to run Hemi-Sync retreats, now marketed as tools for meditation, relaxation, and personal growth, rather than intelligence work. But the document itself never fully went away. Every few years it resurfaces online, and a new wave of people discovers it for the first time. A genuine government-authored report treating the boundary between mind and body as an open scientific question. Whether you think the Gateway process was a legitimate scientific inquiry or a Cold War fever dream, one thing is undeniable. It's real. It happened. A U.S. intelligence officer really did write 29 pages seriously engaging with the idea that human consciousness could leave the body. And that raises the real question worth sitting with. Not whether the CIA believed it, but why an idea this fringe felt worth investigating at all. If you want more deep dives into declassified files the government never expected the public to care about, subscribe, because this channel exists to dig up exactly this kind of story.